What if I told you there was a car that could drive clear across the country on just 22 gallons of regular old tap water? Yeah, no gasoline, zero emissions, just clean, basically free energy. Back in the 1980s, an inventor named Stanley Meyer claimed he'd cracked the code. But this story, well, it doesn't end with a Nobel Prize. It ends in a whole lot of mystery. Those were Stanley Meyer's last words. One minute, he's at a restaurant meeting with potential investors. The next, he's collapsed in the parking lot. And just like that, the story of a world-changing invention turns into a possible murder mystery.
And this is really the heart of the whole conflict, isn't it? On one side, you have this unbelievable promise. A dune buggy that could supposedly go from LA to New York on one tank of H2O. But on the other side, you've got the grim reality. A dead inventor, a technology that just disappeared, and a conspiracy theory that's still alive and well today.
So that's the big question we're going to dig into. Was Stanley Meyer a genius who got silenced before he could change the world? Or was he something else entirely? To figure it out, we've got to start at the very beginning.
Okay, so to really understand this whole thing, we need to go back in time, back to a garage in Ohio and an obsession that was kicked into high gear by the oil shortages of the 1970s.
Stanley Meyer was, your classic American garage inventor. He was self-taught, super patriotic, and he was just appalled by the gas lines and the energy conflicts he saw on the news. For him, this wasn't about getting rich. People say he turned down huge offers from big oil companies that just wanted to buy his tech and bury it. No, Meyer wanted to change the world, not just cash a check. He was playing a completely different game. But how did he say it actually worked? I mean, this sounds like magic, right? Well, let's pull apart the science, looking directly at what he filed in his patents. Okay, so the key to this whole thing, the secret sauce, was a device he called the water capacitor. Now, you've probably heard of electrolysis. That's where you blast water with a ton of electricity to split it. The problem is, it takes more energy to do that than you get back. But Meyer said he was doing something totally different. He claimed he was using water as part of a special circuit, gently coaxing the molecules apart with very little energy. And his patent lays out this exact process. So first, a specific voltage gets the water molecules, which are naturally polar, to all line up. Then, a pulsating electrical field starts to stretch them out. As that stress builds and builds, the bonds holding the hydrogen and oxygen together get weaker and weaker until they just snap. The atoms are set free, creating a burnable mix of hydrogen and oxygen gas. The real trick, according to Meyer, was resonance. He claimed he found the exact right frequency to make water molecules vibrate so intensely that they just fell apart. Kind of like how an opera singer can hit a specific note and shatter a wine glass. It wasn't about brute force. It was about finding that perfect, delicate pulse. And you gotta remember, this wasn't just some wild idea he scribbled on a napkin. In 1989, the U.S. Patent Office actually granted him a patent for his method for the production of a fuel gas. For a little while at least, his revolutionary idea was officially on the books. But, as you know, having a patent and having a working device that anyone can test and reproduce, well, those are two very different things. The more famous Meyer got, the more scientists started looking closer. And that's when things started to go wrong. This timeline really shows you how fast it all fell apart. After the huge win of getting his patent in '89, the tide started to turn. By 1996, some investors sued him for fraud after a demo. And then the final nail in the coffin came in 1998, when a court in his home state of Ohio ruled against him. And the court, wow, they did not mince words. They had an expert witness take a look at his water fuel cell, and the expert basically said, "There's nothing new here. This is just standard electrolysis." The court ended up calling Meyer's invention the most fantastic fraud in history. I mean, that's just a brutal verdict. So you're left with two completely opposite stories. Meyer's supporters see him as this lone genius, a David fighting the Goliath of big oil, who was about to be crushed for inventing something that would put them out of business. But the skeptics, and that includes a lot of scientists, they saw a guy who was either fooling himself or trying to fool everyone else. They said his claims just break the fundamental laws of physics, and, crucially, that nobody could ever get it to work on their own. Which brings us to the absolutely bizarre and tragic climax of this whole story. Even with the courts calling him a fraud, Meyer was still trying to get his project funded. And one last meeting in March of 1998, well, it would be his last. So he's at a restaurant with these two Belgian investors,
His brother was there, and he says Stanley took just one sip of his cranberry juice, immediately grabbed his neck, bolted outside, and fell to his knees. His last words, as we heard, were a desperate claim that he'd been poisoned.
Now, the official autopsy said he died from a cerebral aneurysm, totally natural causes. But that did absolutely nothing to stop the rumors. His dying words became the bedrock of this massive conspiracy theory that he was assassinated to shut him up. The FBI apparently looked into it, but his tech was still considered impossible to reproduce. In the end, all that was left were his patents and notes, which became these almost cult-like objects for a new generation of inventors trying to crack his code. So, after all the patents, the lawsuits, the mystery, the conspiracy, what are we left with? What is the real legacy of Stanley Meyer and his water car? It's pretty amazing. But even today, opinion on Meyer is split right down the middle. You'll find tons of people who are 100% convinced he was a con artist. And you'll find just as many who believe he was a martyr, a genius who was silenced by powerful people. And then there's that smaller group in the middle that thinks, maybe he was just a sincere guy who was mistaken, who couldn't accept that his invention didn't work the way he so badly wanted it to. But no matter what you believe, his story has some serious lessons for anyone trying to build something new. You need rock-solid, verifiable proof. You need to be open and let other experts check your work. That's how you build trust. Meyer was so secretive because he was terrified the oil companies would steal his work. But in the end, that secrecy is what killed his credibility. And I think that really gets to the heart of it. Every truly game-changing idea seems crazy at first, right? People laughed at the Wright brothers. But for every real breakthrough, there are thousands of dead ends. The story of Stanley Meyer is always going to live right on that razor's edge between the two. So, we're left right back where we started. Was he a genius ahead of his time, a clever fraud, or a tragic victim of his own obsession? The real truth behind the car that ran on water, well, that remains one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries.